Imagine waking up 50,000 years ago. You step outside your shelter just as the morning sun begins to rise over the frozen landscape. The air is cold, the smell of smoke lingers from last night's fire, and somewhere in the distance, a herd of woolly mammoths slowly crosses the valley. But the strangest thing isn't the mammoths. It's the fact that you are not the only human on Earth. Not somewhere far away. Not thousands of years before you. Right now, across Europe, another group of humans is preparing for the day's hunt. In the forests of Asia, a different kind of human is raising children and making tools. On a remote Indonesian island, yet another human species is surviving in complete isolation. All of them think, hunt, care for their families, and struggle to survive, just like you. For millions of years, Earth wasn't home to just one humanity. It was home to many. Today, every person alive belongs to a single species, Homo sapiens. Whether you're in Lagos, London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, or New York, we are all part of the same human family. But it wasn't always like this. Scientists now believe that at different points in history, at least 9 human species walked the Earth. Some were taller than us. Some were stronger. Some survived brutal Ice Age winters that would challenge even modern humans. Others evolved on isolated islands, adapting in ways that seem almost unbelievable today. Yet one by one, they disappeared. Not the dinosaurs. Not the mammoths. Humans. So what happened? Did we defeat them in war? Did we outsmart them? Did the changing climate wipe them out? Or is the truth far more surprising than anything we've imagined? The answer has taken decades of research, thousands of fossil discoveries, and one scientific breakthrough that changed everything: ancient DNA. Because the greatest twist in this story is that the other humans may not be as gone as we once believed. To understand why we're the only human species left today, we first have to travel back millions of years, long before cities, civilizations, agriculture, or even language as we know it. Our story begins in Africa. Several million years ago, our distant ancestors were unlike any humans alive today. They walked upright, but their brains were much smaller. They lived in landscapes filled with predators far stronger and faster than they were. Survival depended on constant adaptation. Evolution isn't a ladder where one species neatly turns into another. It's more like a tree. Imagine a giant tree growing over millions of years. Every branch represents a different path. Some branches continue growing, others stop. Some split into new branches, while many eventually die out. Human evolution followed the same pattern. Instead of one straight line leading from ape to modern human, countless populations spread across different environments. Mountains separated them. Deserts isolated them. Ice ages changed their world. Over hundreds of thousands of years, these isolated groups evolved into different human species. Some became specialists in cold climates. Others adapted to tropical forests. Some mastered mountain environments. Each branch of humanity was an experiment written by nature. One of the earliest great travelers was Homo erectus. Appearing nearly 2 million years ago, Homo erectus became one of the most successful humans to ever exist. They learned to make increasingly sophisticated stone tools. Evidence suggests they controlled fire, allowing them to cook food, stay warm, and frighten away predators. Most importantly, they left Africa. Long before our own species began exploring the world, Homo erectus had already spread across vast regions of Asia and parts of Europe. They survived for well over 1 million years, making them one of the longest lasting human species in history. Think about that for a moment. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, have existed for roughly 300,000 years. Homo erectus survived for more than 3 times longer. If survival alone determined success, they would rank among humanity's greatest achievements. Yet even they would eventually disappear. As hundreds of thousands of years passed, new branches continued emerging. Some populations evolved into the powerful Neanderthals. Others became the mysterious Denisovans. On isolated islands, evolution took unexpected directions, producing smaller-bodied humans unlike anything scientists had predicted. For a long time, researchers assumed that whenever a new human species appeared, the older one simply vanished. It seemed logical. But then came one of the greatest surprises in the history of archaeology. The fossil record began telling a different story. Species that scientists once believed lived at completely different times were actually alive together. Not separated by millions of years. Separated by geography. That changed everything. Instead of a lonely march toward modern humanity, prehistoric Earth suddenly looked crowded. Imagine standing on a hill 60,000 years ago. To your west, Neanderthals hunt across frozen valleys. Far to the east, Denisovans survive in rugged mountain landscapes. In Southeast Asia, tiny island humans have adapted to a world unlike anywhere else. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens continue expanding into new territories, carrying new ideas, new tools, and new ways of cooperating. This wasn't a planet occupied by one human species. It was a world shared by many. Each had its own story. Each had overcome incredible challenges. Each had survived countless generations. And for a brief moment in history, they all shared the same Earth. If you could have traveled back in time, you might have met another human face to face. Not an ape. Not a primitive creature. A human. Someone who laughed. Someone who protected their family. Someone who mourned the dead. Someone who watched the same stars you see tonight. That realization changes everything we think we know about ourselves. Because if there were once many human species, the real mystery isn't how they appeared. It's why only one remains. And to answer that question, we first need to meet our closest relatives, the humans who once stood beside us, survived beside us, and in some cases, became part of us. The first relatives we should meet are perhaps the most famous of them all, the Neanderthals. For more than a century, Neanderthals were portrayed as crude cavemen, dim-witted, hunched over, wrapped in animal skins, barely surviving in a harsh world. Popular culture painted them as little more than primitive brutes waiting to be replaced by modern humans. But science tells a very different story. Neanderthals were remarkably intelligent. They appeared around 400,000 years ago and eventually spread across Europe and parts of Western Asia. They lived through some of the coldest periods in human history, surviving Ice Age winters that transformed forests into frozen landscapes and forced animals to migrate across vast distances. Their bodies were perfectly suited for this unforgiving environment. They were shorter than most modern humans but incredibly muscular, with broad chests, powerful limbs, and strong hands capable of incredible precision. Every part of their anatomy reflected thousands of years of adapting to life in the cold. But their greatest achievements weren't physical. Neanderthals crafted sophisticated stone tools, controlled fire, built shelters, hunted enormous animals such as bison, horses, and even mammoths, and cared for injured members of their communities. Archaeologists have discovered Neanderthal skeletons belonging to individuals who survived severe injuries that would have made hunting impossible. Broken bones healed. Missing limbs healed. Some lived for years after devastating accidents. That could only mean one thing. Others cared for them. Someone gathered food for them. Someone protected them. Someone refused to abandon them. Compassion, it seems, did not begin with Homo sapiens. Evidence also suggests Neanderthals buried some of their dead. Whether these burials reflected spiritual beliefs or simply respect for loved ones remains debated, but either explanation reveals something deeply human. These were not mindless creatures. They were people. Different from us, yes, but unmistakably human. Then there are the Denisovans. Unlike the Neanderthals, the Denisovans remained completely unknown until 2010. Their discovery wasn't made through a complete skeleton or a spectacular fossil. It began with a tiny fragment of finger bone found inside Denisova cave in Siberia. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. But when scientists extracted ancient DNA from the fossil, they made a discovery that shocked the scientific world. The DNA belonged to a human species no one had ever identified before. Imagine discovering an entirely new branch of the human family from a piece of bone small enough to fit in your hand. That's exactly what happened. Even today, we know surprisingly little about how Denisovans looked because so few fossils have been found. Yet their genetic legacy lives on. Modern populations in parts of Asia and Oceania still carry Denisovan DNA. One of the most fascinating examples comes from the Tibetan Plateau. Researchers believe certain Denisovan genes help modern Tibetans thrive in high-altitude environments where oxygen levels are far lower than at sea level. In other words, an ancient human species may still be helping people survive today. The story becomes even stranger. Genetic evidence shows that Denisovans and Neanderthals didn't simply coexist. They met. They interbred. In fact, scientists discovered the remains of a teenage girl whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan. She wasn't a theory. She was a real person. A child born from two different human species. That single discovery completely changed how scientists viewed prehistoric humanity. Instead of isolated species living separate lives, the evidence revealed a complicated network of encounters, migrations, relationships, and families stretching across continents. But the surprises don't end there. Thousands of kilometers away, on the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists uncovered one of the most extraordinary discoveries in human evolution. The skeleton belonged to an adult female barely over 1 meter tall. At first, many scientists assumed the bones belonged to a modern human with a medical condition. But the evidence kept pointing somewhere else. This was an entirely different human species. Today we know them as Homo floresiensis. Many people simply call them the hobbits. Standing about 3.5 feet tall, these tiny humans lived on an isolated island for tens of thousands of years. Despite their small brains, they created stone tools and hunted surprisingly large animals, including dwarf elephants that once roamed the island. Their existence reminded scientists of one of evolution's greatest lessons. Given enough time and isolation, nature can produce astonishing results. Not far away, another discovery added yet another branch to the human family tree. In the Philippines, researchers uncovered fossils belonging to Homo luzonensis. Like Homo floresiensis, these humans evolved in isolation, developing a unique combination of ancient and modern features unlike any previously known species. Each discovery made the human story more complicated. Instead of one neat family tree, researchers now faced a tangled forest of branches crossing, separating, and reconnecting across hundreds of thousands of years. And then there was Homo naledi. Discovered deep inside a cave system in South Africa, the remains of more than a dozen individuals raised questions that scientists are still trying to answer today. Their brains were much smaller than ours. Yet evidence suggests they may have deliberately placed their dead deep inside difficult-to-reach chambers. If true, that behavior challenges one of our oldest assumptions, that complex rituals belonged only to large-brained humans. Perhaps intelligence wasn't as simple as we once believed. Perhaps different human species solved life's challenges in different ways. The deeper scientists looked, the more difficult it became to draw a clear line between them and us. Every new fossil seemed to erase another assumption. Every new DNA sequence revealed another unexpected connection. The human story was becoming less like a straight line, and more like an enormous family reunion. Some relatives were close. Others were distant. Some met only briefly. Others shared generations together. But almost all of them had one thing in common. They survived. For tens of thousands. Sometimes hundreds of thousands. Even millions of years. These were not failed experiments. They were incredibly successful human species. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If Neanderthals were intelligent, if Denisovans adapted to some of Earth's harshest environments, if Homo erectus survived for over 1 million years, if tiny island humans flourished in complete isolation, then why are they gone? While we are still here? The answer, as scientists have discovered, is far more complicated than a battle between stronger and weaker humans. Because the evidence suggests that when these species finally met, the story didn't begin with war. It began with something far more unexpected. For generations, people imagined the meeting between Homo sapiens and the other human species as the ultimate prehistoric war. The story seemed simple. Modern humans left Africa, spread across the world, defeated every rival, and claimed the planet for themselves. It's a dramatic story. It's also almost certainly incomplete. The evidence we have today paints a far more fascinating picture. Imagine walking through a valley somewhere in Europe around 45,000 years ago. Your hunting party has spent days tracking reindeer through the snow. As the sun begins to set, you notice something unusual. Smoke. Not from your own camp. Someone else is nearby. As you move closer, you begin to recognize footprints unlike your own. They're wider, heavier. The people who made them are powerfully built. Then, across the river, you see them. Neanderthals. For a few moments, both groups simply watch each other. Neither side knows what the other intends. Should they approach? Should they leave? Should they prepare to fight? We may never know exactly how encounters like these unfolded. But we do know one thing. They happened. Not once. Not twice. Probably thousands of times. Sometimes those meetings may have been hostile. Competition for food, shelter, fresh water, or hunting territory could easily have led to conflict. During harsh Ice Age winters, when resources became scarce, even small disagreements might have turned deadly. But violence cannot explain everything. Because hidden inside nearly every person of European or Asian ancestry is remarkable evidence that tells another story. Your DNA. In 2010, scientists achieved something once thought impossible. They successfully sequenced the Neanderthal genome. When they compared it with the DNA of modern humans, they found something astonishing. People living outside Africa inherited roughly 1 to 2% of their DNA from Neanderthals. The conclusion was unavoidable. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals had children together. This wasn't speculation. It was written inside our own bodies. Every generation passed these genes forward, preserving a small piece of another human species across tens of thousands of years. The same is true for Denisovans. Certain populations in Asia and Oceania inherited Denisovan DNA, proving that our ancestors also met and formed families with them. Think about what this means. Somewhere in prehistoric Europe, a Homo sapiens woman may have fallen in love with a Neanderthal man. Or perhaps it happened the other way around. Somewhere in Asia, Denisovans and Homo sapiens didn't simply exchange tools or stories. They exchanged families. Children were born carrying the heritage of two different human species. One fossil discovered in Siberia belonged to exactly such a child. Her mother was Neanderthal. Her father was Denisovan. She reminds us that prehistoric humanity wasn't neatly divided into separate worlds. The boundaries between species were sometimes surprisingly blurred. Yet despite these encounters, despite sharing genes, despite sharing landscapes, something changed. Gradually, the number of Neanderthals declined. Denisovan populations became smaller. Other human species disappeared from the fossil record. This wasn't a sudden catastrophe. It unfolded over thousands of years. Imagine watching the lights of neighboring villages slowly disappear, one after another, over many generations. No single battle. No single disaster. Just fewer camps. Fewer voices. Fewer children. Until eventually, only one remained. For decades, scientists searched for a single explanation. Perhaps Homo sapiens were simply stronger. But that doesn't fit the evidence. Neanderthals were physically stronger than us. Perhaps we were more intelligent. Again, the evidence isn't so simple. Neanderthals created sophisticated tools. They mastered fire. They cared for their injured. They likely communicated using complex sounds. Perhaps disease wiped them out. It's possible diseases played some role after different populations met, but there is no evidence for one devastating epidemic that explains every disappearance. Perhaps climate change was responsible. Again, partly, but not entirely. Climate shifted dramatically during the Ice Age, transforming forests into open grasslands, changing migration routes, and forcing both animals and humans to adapt. Yet Homo sapiens experienced those same climate changes. Why did one species survive while the others gradually vanished? Today, most researchers believe the answer wasn't one reason. It was many. Imagine trying to win a marathon. Not because you're the fastest runner, but because you sleep a little better, eat a little better, recover a little faster, avoid injuries more often, choose smarter routes, and keep improving every year. No single advantage wins the race. Together, they change everything. The same may have been true for Homo sapiens. Perhaps we weren't dramatically smarter. Perhaps we weren't dramatically stronger. Perhaps we were simply a little more adaptable. A little better at sharing ideas. A little better at cooperating with strangers. A little quicker to innovate. Over thousands of years, small advantages become enormous ones. A hunting technique discovered by one group could spread across hundreds of kilometers. A better spear design could be copied, improved, and passed to the next generation. A successful survival strategy didn't disappear when one hunter died. It became part of a growing network of shared knowledge. Ideas began evolving faster than biology itself. And once that happened, human history would never be the same. Perhaps the most surprising conclusion isn't that Homo sapiens survived. It's that survival itself may have changed what it meant to be human. Imagine living in a world where winter arrives earlier than expected. The animals you've hunted for generations suddenly disappear. A river that once provided water dries up. The forest your grandparents knew becomes an open grassland. Everything you depended on begins to change. In a world like that, survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about changing before the world forces you to. Again and again, Homo sapiens seemed remarkably good at adapting. When one food source disappeared, they searched for another. When climates shifted, they migrated. When old tools became less effective, they invented new ones. Most importantly, they didn't have to solve every problem from the beginning. Each generation inherited the discoveries of the last. Knowledge accumulated. Mistakes became lessons. Lessons became traditions. Traditions became culture. Culture became one of the greatest survival tools evolution had ever produced. But adaptation alone may not tell the entire story. Population size likely mattered too. Imagine two villages. One has 50 people, the other has 5,000. In the larger community, more children are born. More ideas are shared. More inventions appear. If one group suffers a drought, another nearby community may still survive and help them recover. The larger the network, the more resilient it becomes. Many scientists believe Homo sapiens gradually formed larger and more connected populations than other human species. These networks allowed information, tools, and innovations to spread farther and faster than ever before. A better spear invented hundreds of kilometers away could eventually reach people who had never met its creator. One discovery no longer belonged to one family. It belonged to everyone. That may have been one of our greatest advantages. Not greater intelligence. Shared intelligence. For a long time, scientists searched for the one answer that explained why every other human species disappeared. Today, many believe there isn't one. Climate change, competition, small population sizes, genetics, disease, interbreeding, innovation, cooperation, each may have contributed a small piece to the puzzle. On their own, none fully explains the mystery. Together, they begin to tell the story. But here's where this story takes one final and unexpected turn. Did the other human species truly disappear? Or did part of them survive? If your ancestors came from Europe or Western Asia, there is a good chance that between 1 and 2% of your DNA came from Neanderthals. If your ancestors came from parts of Asia or Oceania, you may carry Denisovan DNA. That means every time scientists study the human genome, they aren't just studying Homo sapiens. They're studying a family reunion written into our cells. Tiny fragments of ancient relatives continue living inside billions of people today. In that sense, Neanderthals never completely vanished. Neither did the Denisovans. They became part of us. Perhaps extinction isn't always as absolute as it seems. The boundaries between them and us were never as clear as we once believed. The more scientists discover, the more those lines continue to blur. Every new fossil, every new excavation, every new DNA sequence adds another chapter to a story we once thought was finished. And that means one incredible truth remains. Human history is still being written. Somewhere beneath a layer of ancient rock. Inside a cave that has never been explored. Or buried beneath the frozen ground of Siberia. The next discovery may already be waiting. A single tooth. A fragment of bone. A strand of ancient DNA. Any one of them could rewrite everything we think we know about ourselves. Perhaps that's the most exciting part of science. The greatest discoveries are often the ones nobody expected. Before 2010, almost no one had heard of Denisovans. Today, we know their DNA still lives inside millions of people. What astonishing branch of our family tree is still waiting to be found? We simply don't know. Now, imagine something for a moment. Imagine boarding a train tomorrow morning. You find an empty seat and look across the aisle. Sitting opposite you isn't another Homo sapiens. It's a Neanderthal. He's reading a newspaper. A Denisovan walks onto the train carrying a briefcase. At the next stop, a family of Homo floresiensis steps aboard. Children from different human species laugh together on their way to school. Doctors, engineers, artists, teachers, athletes. All human. Yet all different. How different would our world be? Would our cities look the same? Would our laws be different? Would we still think of ourselves as one humanity? Or would we finally understand that being human has never meant looking exactly alike? We'll never know. Because today, only one human species remains. At least, that's what we used to think. The next time you look into a mirror, remember this. You're looking at the last surviving human species. But you're also looking at the legacy of countless others who walked this planet long before you. Their struggles shaped our survival. Their stories shaped our history. And in ways we're only beginning to understand. A small part of them still lives on inside us. Perhaps the greatest mistake we can make isn't forgetting how they disappeared. It's forgetting that they were never so different from us in the first place. Because for millions of years, humanity was never one story. It was many, many voices, many journeys, many species, until eventually, only one remained. Or perhaps, only one remained visible. The rest are still with us. Hidden inside every fossil, hidden inside our DNA, hidden inside the unanswered questions that continue to drive science forward. Because every fossil has a story. Every discovery changes history. And every question has a story. If this documentary has changed the way you see history, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Hidden Origin for more incredible discoveries.